Good morning. And may I call the meeting of the Public Accounts Enterprises Committee to order and to warmly welcome all of the officials from the various entities here this morning. I want to welcome particularly officials from the Ministry of Finance, Investments Division, officials from the Ministry of Public Utilities, and of course, the Telecommunication Services of Trinidad and Tobago, and members of the media as well as members of the public. May I advise from the outset that this meeting is being held in public and is being broadcast live on the Parliament's Channel 11 and Radio 105.5 FM and the Parliament's YouTube channel, ParlView. Viewers and listeners can send their comments related to today's topic via email, parl101@ttparliament.org, facebook.com/ttparliament, and Twitter @ttparliament. May I also indicate from the very outset the purpose of our meeting. The purpose of this meeting of the Public Accounts Enterprises Committee is to examine the audited accounts, balance sheet, and other financial statements of the Telecommunication Services of Trinidad and Tobago Limited for the period 2008 to 2016. This committee is desirous of hearing from the key stakeholders of TSTT to learn of the challenges being faced and determine some of the possible solutions and measures to overcome these challenges. The role of the Public Accounts Enterprises Committee is to help. May I emphasize, our role is to help TSTT improve its delivery of services in an efficient, effective, and economic manner. At this point in time, I would ask the officials from the Ministry of Finance, in this particular order, to introduce themselves, followed by members of the Ministry of Public Utilities, followed by officials from the Telecommunication Services of Trinidad and Tobago. But before inviting the Ministry of Finance, Investments Division to introduce themselves, I want to take the opportunity to ask members of the Public Accounts Enterprises Committee to introduce themselves, and then I will then refer to the Investments Division, followed by Public Utilities, and then officials from the Telecommunication Services. So I can start on my far right.
Good morning, Shamfa Kojo, member.
Good morning, everyone. I'm David Small. I'm a member of the committee.
Good morning, Tim Gopi Singh, Vice Chair, member of the committee.
Good morning, Wade Mark, Chairman.
A very good morning, Fitzgerald Haynes, member.
Thank you kindly, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Chairman of TSTT and your team. Welcome, Jennifer Batiste Primus, member.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome, Cherry and Critchlow Coburn, member.
Sorry. Good morning. My name is Yvette Ba from the Investment Division of the Ministry of Finance. I'm the Director of Social and Economic Transformation.
Good morning. I'm Sharon Mohammed, Director, Agro-Based Manufacturing Services Sector, Ministry of Finance, Investments Division.
Morning, Maurice Sweet, Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Public Utilities.
Good morning. Vashti Shri Krishnan Singh Jitman, Deputy Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Public Utilities.
Good morning. Anika Sarah Farmer, Director, Legal Services, Ministry of Public Utilities.
Good day. John Thompson, Telecommunications Sector Specialist, Ministry of Public Utilities.
Communication Services to introduce themselves, starting with the chairman.
Good morning, Chairman, and thank you for having us. My name is Emil Elias. I'm the chairman of TSTT.
Good morning. Oh, sorry.
Good morning. My name is Ian Narayan. I'm a director on TSTT.
Morning, Chairman and members. Ronald Walcott, Chief Executive Officer, TSTT.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Carol David. I'm the Executive Vice President, Human Resources, Industrial Relations, and Corporate Support Services.
Good morning, Chairman, members. I am Charles Carter, the Executive Vice President, Legal, Regulatory, Carrier Services, and the Corporate Secretary.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Gerald Cooper, Chief Financial Officer, TSTT.
Morning, Chairman and members. I'm Rakesh Goswami, the Executive Vice President for Strategic Alliance, Enterprise, and Tobago Operations.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Michael Hamilton. I'm the Chief Operations Officer, TSTT.
Good morning. I'm Faid Mohammed, Senior Manager, Business Effectiveness.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Marlon Morris. I'm the Chief Performance Officer at TSTT.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Miguel Garcia. I'm the Chief Commercial Officer.
Good morning, Chairman and members. My name is Adrian Clark, and I'm the Chief Internal Auditor.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Roger Richards, and I'm the Chief Technology and Information Officer.
Is there anyone else that I have left out? Well, thank you very much. At this point in time, on behalf of the Public Accounts Enterprises Committee, may I invite the distinguished chairman of TSTT to make some brief opening remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. And I want to start by saying that we consider it a great honor and a privilege to be here today because we are proud of what we are doing at TSTT and would be very pleased to share this with you. I know that you opened by saying we're here to examine the accounts of TSTT for the last 8 years. I want to emphasize that these accounts have been published on time every year, fully audited, and so we would be looking retrospectively at accounts that have been published on time and continue to do so. In fact, more recently, we published our half-year accounts for the current financial year that ended on March 31st, 2017. That said, Mr. Chairman, I was pleased when you said that beyond the purpose of the meeting as tabled, which is to examine the accounts, that you wanted to learn about the challenges that TSTT faces and that you see your role as assisting in any way you can. And I hope that during these proceedings you will allow us an opportunity to speak about a number of critical issues that we have addressed, are addressing, and will continue to develop. One is our 5-year strategic plan, which is a detailed document that is a roadmap of the future. And this has been shared widely with all the stakeholders, including our employees, our senior managers, the board, everybody. We want to talk a little bit about the relationship we have with the regulator, that is the Telecommunications Authority of Trinidad and Tobago. We want to talk about the status of our trade union relationships, and we would like to let the committee know the status of the 49% shareholding currently still held by Cable and Wireless. So permit me, if we can, during these proceedings, to share with you some of this vital information. And I want to emphasize, Chairman, my view is that while we will touch on the past, I am more focused on the present and where we intend to go in the future. And I hope that we will all be guided by that particular position that I have just outlined. I don't think it would be of any great benefit to spend too much time talking about who did what and who didn't do what in many years gone by. I've been here 18 months, our new board is 18 months old, and our management team is in place, growing all the time, and I think I would like to ask your indulgence, if I may, in focusing on the present and the future more than on the past. Thank you.
Well, may I, first of all, thank you for your opening remarks and to indicate from the very outset that we too are very pleased and happy that the TSTT as a state majority-owned enterprise has been able to be on time with your audited financial accounts and statements. That is very refreshing, given what we have experienced in the past, not with TSTT, but other entities. I must disappoint you. Our mandate as a committee, whilst we would look and examine, as you rightly said, with some current realities that you are faced with, and I'm sure we will find the time to facilitate your interventions in the areas that you have outlined. Our responsibility as a parliamentary committee enshrined and entrenched in the Constitution is to deal with the accounts for the period 2008 to 2016, and most importantly, to examine some of the responses that we have gotten from TSTT based on some of the concerns and questions that we have raised. But I am conscious of the fact that you're a new board and that you are just there 20 months or less, and therefore you wouldn't know everything of the past. And that is why there's institutional memory within the organization. There will be continuity in terms of policy and changes where necessary, so that we would expect the team to at least have some reflection and understanding of the recent past as it relates to these accounts that are currently before this committee. But I would like to begin very early in the proceedings, and I want to take up your suggestion that we look at some current matters as we focus on what has happened in the last few years at TSTT. If I may invite you, Mr. Chairman, to refer to your own submission, I would like you to go to the section that deals with, I think it's item 4, that deals with some key objectives for the organization's growth and development. That would come under what is called general questions that you would have submitted. Let me see if I can get it. Not general question, rather. Yeah. Yeah. It is page 6, I understand, on your document. We read on page 6 that some of your objectives as it relates to what is described here as a growth pillar of some 20%, as you seek to move your company to a value amounting to just under $4 billion, which includes mergers and acquisitions, both organically and inorganically. Now, against this background, would you want to share with this committee this recent, what I call acquisition, I may be right or I might be wrong, but you will guide me, of the Massey Communications, and tell us as a committee, how does that fit into your strategic plan as a company as you look into the future in a very competitive environment? So, Mr. Chairman, maybe you can probably clarify and advise.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and it was, I suppose, may I say, the hand of God that created an opportunity the day before we were to meet before this distinguished group. We have a very robust 5-year strategic plan, very robust, very detailed, and one that we are revisiting on a regular basis. I have to say that in the 18 months I've been there, I think the roadmap has changed twice as we adjust to the realities of new technology and new circumstances, both competitive and otherwise, that we are facing. So part of our strategic plan, which will cost approximately $3.8 billion, was a funding with the local banking system, completely underwritten by Republic Bank, of $1.9 billion. And I need to comfort this committee that TSTT does not rely on the government or the Ministry of Finance for any subventions or other support. And this funding was done without any need for government guarantees or other interventions. In that 5-year plan, Mr. Chairman and members, we envisaged, among other things, rolling out 21st century technology, which is our fiber, and crossing 200,000 homes in 5 years. When we found out that Massey would consider selling as opposed to the proposal they had put to us for infrastructure sharing, and I have to explain that that infrastructure sharing was a very positive suggestion in that it meant that where Massey had already rolled out their fiber, which they had done, and they had crossed some 34,000 homes in various areas which they had outlined in yesterday's press conference, including Sadie Diego Martin Valley. TSTT had not yet done so and was planning to do so with the part of the proceeds of the financing that we had raised and the internally generated funds that we expected to raise during the 5 years. So by the acquisition of Massey, which is really an operational decision we made, what we have acquired is 900 kilometers of fiber already laid in areas that we were intending to go to and had not yet done so. So the foreign exchange we saved, we estimate going forward, could be as much as $20 million that we would have had to spend in acquiring the foreign components that we would need in order to roll that fiber out in the areas we had not yet gone to, that Massey had already gone to. So it became for us a perfect fit and a win-win situation, because this business was not the core business of Massey. And as they said yesterday, they took a corporate decision to reallocate their resources in their core business. However, this is our core business. And so we acquired all the fiber that they already laid, that we now no longer have to lay. We acquired the entire customer base in the entertainment sector, which is approximately 5,500 customers. We acquired fiber that has crossed 34,000 homes, many of whom already have services from TSTT of a different kind, and therefore we would be able to go into those customers and find a way to win them over into additional services that we have and bundle them as we have been advertising. We also acquired the business enterprise side of Massey Communications, which is the whole Massey conglomerate. So we also have them as our customers going forward. And we are talking to them and have agreed to collaborate in the future with their special Massey customer loyalty program. Thank you. Their loyalty program, so that we each can have the synergies that make this the excellent fit that it was. So we worked very hard to negotiate. It was tough, and we eventually came out with a price which our board of directors unanimously approved. And yesterday we signed a share purchase agreement, as you may have read in today's papers, and we will be closing the transaction subject to regulatory approvals. Letters will now be sent to TAT. They would need to give their consent, and once those consents have been obtained, and we see no reason why not, then we will close the deal perhaps within the next few weeks. And so I want to share with you that we at TSTT are extremely pleased to have been able to acquire Massey Communications at this time.
May I also ask what kind of due diligence would have been executed, and would you want to share with us any documentation you might have in your possession as a company to better inform this committee, so when we are reporting to Parliament, we can do so from an informed perspective?
So maybe I omitted to say in my opening statement, Mr. Chairman, that during these proceedings I may once or twice decline your invitation to share confidential documents, because we are in an extremely competitive environment. But let me assure the committee there was an intense due diligence done, very intense. We engaged specialized consultants. We had our legal team, and we were completely satisfied that what we were getting was a transaction which we could be comfortable and proud of, but we are not prepared to or can share with you that kind of confidential due diligence, because it would then be exposed to the very competition we hope to terrorize with this acquisition.
Well, may I remind you, maybe you're not familiar, but this is a constitutional body that you're speaking to, and there is no possibility of you declining. You may request that because of the confidential nature of the information, that you would prefer us to meet in camera to discuss it, or you may want to submit it in writing, as I have said, and of course, any document that comes before us is treated with the greatest degree of confidentiality. But I would suggest, Mr. Chairman, that under our regulations and rules, it is very, very unlikely that your request would be entertained, meaning that you will decline. That is not permitted under our arrangements here. So what I can say to you is that because of the confidential nature, and trust me, we are here to protect and help. We are not here to provide information to your competitors. This is the Parliament. So we will treat whatever is given to this committee with the highest degree of confidentiality. And as you have said, if you believe, and I understand what you're saying, we need to have an in-camera discussion, we can have it. The press would not be here. We will talk between and among ourselves. So I just want you to take note of that so that, because sometimes, we may not be fully acquainted with our rules and regulations, but the rules are very clear on these matters. This is the Parliament of the Republic of TNT. This is a constitutionally entrenched body, and it is very difficult for any entity to come before us and decline information requested by this body. So I just want you to take note of that so that you'll be aware of that. So maybe you may wish to examine the invitation to share these matters on a confidential basis in camera.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I hear what you say, and I have the highest regard for the Parliament, and in fact, for all the institutions in our country that we need to ensure that we strengthen. However, we did sign a non-disclosure agreement regarding this matter, and TSTT respectfully declines at this time. I have to seek some more advice and on reflection. Maybe you would have us back another time if and when the matter needs to be ventilated. But in my judgment at this time, I may say that the experts that we employed did a thorough job, and I hope that your committee would not attempt to second-guess the details of due diligence that brought us to where we are today. But however, you have your job to do, I have mine. I will seek advice. But at the moment, I respectfully decline.
Well, Mr. Chairman, we will come back to that subject because we wouldn't want to detain you on this matter.
Okay.
There are several other matters, but I want to tell you that we too decline your offer. So at least you will understand that there is a collision here. So we'll have to resolve it. But we wouldn't want to detain you at this time. There are some other areas I'd like to proceed and address. First of all, you also indicated, and I think that that is a very highly complementary position, that is TSTT is a company that does not depend on the state for support, which is very, very good. But as a majority-owned state entity, could you share with this committee whether the government or the cabinet of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago was made aware of this acquisition at the sum of $255 million? Or did they read, like us, in the newspapers, that decision?
I think the latter point is correct.
So
they read it in the newspapers. This was an operational decision to acquire assets which we would normally have built out ourselves. So the board of directors acted within the mandate we have within TSTT. And may I say, Mr. Chairman, TSTT is a peculiar sort of state enterprise. Many years ago, the High Court and Appeal Court were asked to rule on the status of TSTT vis-a-vis the Freedom of Information Act and the Integrity Commission. And the courts have ruled that we are not subject to the Freedom of Information Act and we are not subject to the Integrity Commission. Long before my time, these were decisions made, and that is now case law. It was not challenged. So we also, I think they took into account the fact that 49% was privately owned, so that it was tantamount to asking foreign directors, they had 4 directors on the board, to submit to the Integrity Commission, etc. Also, on the Freedom of Information side, the courts ruled that we didn't have to do it because, again, we were faced with a liberalized telecommunication sector, and we are not required to respond to any request for information from the public under the FOIA. So I think we have a little peculiar relationship here. 51% of TSTT is owned by NEL. NEL is actually a publicly traded company which is not wholly owned by the government, but I think wholly owned by citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. And so the people of Trinidad and Tobago, all 1.6 million of us, own a substantial share of TSTT. And with that in mind, I ask you to reconsider this issue about the confidential audit documents that may or may not be required by your committee.
As I said, that we will discuss that as we proceed.
Right.
You would appreciate too that the Parliament of the Republic of TNT, all 41 elected MPs represent 1.3 or 4 million people. So we have a very important responsibility as it relates to accountability.
Mr. Chairman, why did you cut down the number? I said 1.6 million. I don't know if you're challenging my census estimate.
All right. Okay, no problem. As we on that particular point, Mr. Elias, you did mention, and I'm happy to know that there's a strategic plan, and it has been shared widely. Would you be kind enough to make a copy of that plan available to this committee? And could you tell us, for instance, what is the period of your strategic plan? Is it 2015 to 2020, 2016 to 2021? What is the period?
We will share the plan with you, Mr. Chairman.
And what is the period of the plan?
It's 5 years starting this year.
Starting this year? So it's 2017?
Sorry, 2016, starting 2016, 5 years.
Okay. Okay. Right. All right, I'll now invite my colleagues and so on to, and I'll come back.
Thank you very much, Chair. Good morning, members of the TSTT board and executive and all the affiliated institutions related to it. My question, first of all, is directed to the chairman on the issue of the 1.9 billion borrowing, which you said that the government does not have to underwrite as a guarantor. Being owned 51% shares by NEL, did you have to seek the permission of the board of directors of NEL before going into that borrowing? And who has guaranteed the $1.9 billion? Is it TSTT? And on what basis TSTT is guaranteeing to pay back that 1.9 billion, and over what terms and over what period of time this $1.9 billion will be paid back to Republic Bank?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Deputy Chairman. First, let me say that we made a presentation of our 5-year plan to the Ministry of Finance and obtained their no objection to going out on the market to borrow the money.
Just, can I stick up in? Is it in writing or?
Oh, yes.
Writing.
Oh, yes. So the current practice, if not the law, is that in order to monitor the borrowings of various entities in which the government has either control or ownership of, that you do have to obtain from the Minister of Finance his no objection to going out in the market to borrow the money. So we obtained that first. We then went out on the market with a presentation of our 5-year strategic plan and the portion of it that required financing, and we demonstrated that we would generate internally the funds to make up the difference between the 1.9 billion and the estimated value of the 5-year strategic plan implementation, which was 3.8 billion. So we approached the banking system and we obtained the fully underwritten 1.9 billion financing, and that is what we are using to go forward with implementing our 5-year plan. And I must say that buying the Massey Communications business, or agreeing to buy it yesterday, is actually fits perfectly in to the 5-year plan. They have what we were going to implement anyway. And so it just accelerated the development of some of those assets by about maybe 1.5 to 2 years. So we have an extra 34,000 homes we can vigorously go to and sell services and a suite of services. added to the 24,000 homes we've already crossed. Now we must make them customers. We don't yet have them, but there are 59,000 homes we can now approach with high-speed quality services as a result of this acquisition.
Yeah, sure. Well, let's come back to the question I asked. You said that you had to go to the Minister of Finance for written permission. Could you...
Not permission, no objection.
No objection. Okay. Could you explain to the viewing audience the reason for having to do so? Is it in the Minister of Finance having the function as corporation sole, and his relationship with NEL, which is a public traded company, but government has majority shares in NEL? My understanding is government has majority shares in NEL, so it's therefore partly majority owned by the state and the corporation sole. So could you give us the rationale for you having to undertake going to the Minister of Finance for his no objection? Could you explain that to the viewing audience?
I'd be glad to do. First, let me say, Mr. Deputy Chairman, that when Cable and Wireless acquired Flow, or vice versa, and they had to vacate the 4 seats they had on our board of directors. Otherwise, TAT, I would say the old board of TAT, would not have approved the acquisition. So they vacated the board of TSTT. They still hold the shares to this day, but they're supposed to sell them, and they have some deadlines to sell them. When they vacated the board, the 4 seats they held on our board were filled by directors of NEL. So NEL now sits on our board as NEL directors. There are 4 of them. Of course, NEL's board is also appointed by the government, but I'm making the legal distinction that there are 5 members of our board appointed by the government historically since CWC came into our company, and CWC had 4, and now it's NEL that has those 4. Secondly, when I came into this office, I discovered
the 5 on TSTT board appointed by the state.
The 5 were appointed historically since 1991.
Right. Okay.
Right. So we are now 9 members, as we always were, but 4 of those members are actually board members of NEL as well, and NEL sends them instead of Cable and Wireless. With respect to why we require, or why any state company requires a letter saying there's no objection to them raising money from the Ministry of Finance, is because since the days when Karen Teixeira was the Minister of Finance, I am told the Ministry of Finance was concerned because a number of state companies were engaging in borrowings without the knowledge of the Ministry of Finance. So while they issued this edict that every state company that requires to borrow any money may not need their permission, but they need a letter of no objection, which means then that the Ministry of Finance is aware of the intention of the respective state agency to go out into the market to borrow money, because it impacts on the banking system. You would imagine $1.9 billion is not a small amount of money. It's one of the largest private placements, I think, in the history of Trinidad and Tobago. So we met a situation where it is standard operating procedure that a state company requiring to borrow money writes and explains its reasons to the Ministry of Finance and obtains a no objection.
Right, thank you. Just to follow up on the same question. What's the period of the borrowing, the repayment to Republic Bank?
And the rate of interest. Jared? I will ask the CFO to answer your question, Mr. Deputy Chairman.
Hi, good morning, member. So the 1.9 billion, 1.5 billion so far has been drawn down in 2 tranches. 1 billion is over a 10-year tenor with a 2-year moratorium at 6%. And 500 million is tranche 2, that's over a 5-year period, also with a 2-year moratorium at 5.5%.
Who has stood the guarantee for the 1.9 billion borrowing?
It's over the fixed and floating assets of TSTT.
Of TSTT?
Yeah.
As we on that point, what's your total asset at the moment?
Our total, in terms of our PPE, we're just, in terms of our physical assets, just about 3.3 billion. Our total fixed assets are just under 5 billion.
How much? I missed that.
Our total assets are 4.9 billion. And in terms of our physical assets, just around 3 billion.
So the money was lent to you based on TSTT's guarantee itself?
Yes, 100%.
All right. Now, I want to have a few more questions before my colleagues come in. Could you give us an idea of your personnel, the amount of personnel that you have within TSTT? What's the cost to the company? Your annual revenue? Well, let's say you may want to go back 2 or 3 years. Your expenditure, total expenditure, and your return on assets, let's say for the last 3 years, including 16, 15, 14, if you could give us some answers to that.
The first part of your question regarding the personnel, you wanted numbers or value?
Numbers and the value.
Both. Okay, so I'd like to start by asking our CEO and Carol David, the Vice President, to respond to the headcount aspect of your question.
Thank you. Morning, member. Currently, TSTT has two different types of workforce. We have full-time employees. They're circa 2,300 employees. And then we have what we call an ancillary workforce that has another 400-odd employees, taking the total employee count to in the region of 2,700 employees. We have been looking at various mechanisms in terms of employee cost and employee management. And the cost as it pertains today, in terms of total, is around $750 million annually.
That's for your employment, for your personnel?
Yes.
And your operating costs annually?
So in terms of our total operating expenditures, about 1.5 billion.
And that includes the 700 million plus for the personnel?
Yes.
So you have a personnel and operating cost total $1.5 billion annually? 1.5 billion?
Yes, correct. Mm-hmm.
What's your revenue?
Our revenue for the past 5 years has been about 3 billion.
3 billion. Mm-hmm. What's your profit on an annual basis? Let's say you could go back 16, 15, 14.
On average, in terms of normalized profits, would be just under 100 million.
Could you give us some exact figures if you have it there as finance director?
Yeah, sure. So effectively, over the past 5 years, we have had fluctuating profits based on decisions that we have made, actually revolving around our personal costs. Meaning specifically, for the year ended March 14, we did a VSEP offering, a voluntary separation program across the company to both management as well as unionized members. So in that year, we would have taken a significant provision. So that actually was the second year in the history of TSTT since 1990 that we would have recorded a loss.
What was the loss in 2014?
That loss effectively was just around 600 million.
Give us the idea in 15 and 16 in terms of your profitability.
So in terms of 2015, we made a profit of 225 million.
Yeah.
And March 16, March 16 had two specific items which were very material and exceptional. The decision that we actually made in 2014 We withdrew the VSAP offering related to our unionized staff. And we also took a very assertive, and this is what the chairman was speaking to in terms of where we're going to very assertively. We took a decision to accelerate our depreciation and as well as take an impairment on our fixed assets. And this really revolved around our decision to move really from, which is in our response, from a traditional and legacy telecoms company to an agile broadband company. So it therefore meant that we would have taken a combined accelerated depreciation and impairment expense of just around 575 million. So for the year March ended 16, we made a loss of just around 300 million. So when you ask me, circa, how much we have made for the past 5 years, there were over 2 of the past 5 years, we did have some exceptional items.
Are you comfortable? Could you give us an idea of your return on your assets in terms of the years? I see some negative return on assets over the years, and you're now going further, going downhill to minus, in 2013, well, let's say go back to 11, your return on assets was 0.01, on 12 was 0.02. In your book, it's on page 67. 2013, 0.01, 2014, minus 0.11, 2016, minus 0.07. Now, could I ask you if you feel comforted in the fact that you have a revenue of $3 billion annually, and you have an operating expenditure of $1.5 billion. So why is it that your profit is not higher? And are you comforted by going through from year to year on your return on assets, or which is net profit to total assets, in the negative figure? So here you have $3 billion of revenue, and you have a negative return on assets or net profit to total assets. How can you feel comforted as an organization for that happening? And we are asking these questions because we will seek to give you some help to see whether you need help to increase your profitability.
So, member, first of all, the short answer to your question is no. We were not and still not satisfied with the return on asset, the return on investment. And that is primarily the reason we recalibrated our strategic plan. In the mention and some of the questions, I know the plan that was referred to is one that has been superseded by the existing board that exists today. So, in the response that the CFO gave, he did indicate that our revenue has been circa $3 billion for the last 5 years. However, our cost, particularly our employee costs, has continued to rise exponentially over the past several years. Additionally, the telecommunications industry has made some fundamental shifts. When this company started back in the telco, textile days, telecoms was around voice. Voice revenue was an integral part of the revenue component. Voice revenue does not exist anymore. It's all around data. It means that the margins on the business has significantly changed. It then required us to review our strategy, and that is the reason for this new and revised, very aggressive strategic plan. Our plan is premised on 4 fundamental pillars, as the chairman alluded to in his opening. If you would just permit me a couple of minutes just to elaborate on them. So we looked at TSTT holistically, and we delivered and for consideration by the board, who then determined, after much interrogation, the best way forward for us. Our plan can be decomposed into some simple terms, which I would share with the committee now. First of all, we have one primary mandate, and our mandate is to transform ourselves from being a 20th century legacy telecommunications company to becoming an agile broadband communications company of the 21st century. To do so,
Mr. Walcott, we are hearing you. I just want to simply get to the answer. I know you have your strategic plan and your goals and your objectives, and you're working to transformation of the company. But here it is, the population looking on. You're receiving $3 billion. Your cost for your personnel, as you said, is about $700 million. Your operating cost with personnel goes to total $1.5 billion. How do you explain the difference between that $1.5 billion in personnel expenditure and operating costs and your revenue? What has happened to that other $1.5 billion?
Yeah, so I will get to the CFO answer, but he was answering specifically about
we
the question.
We have limited time to question you.
The question that you asked.
Yeah.
In revenue, there is cost of sales associated with revenue, which is not part of what we would consider operational costs. So he was speaking about maintenance and expenses and personnel costs, but there is a direct relationship with cost of sales, and then there are other items, below the line items, as depreciation and so on. But we'll clarify that now.
Okay, so in response to your question, your first question as regards being comforted, the context that I have to give for that answer, which is to repeat what the CEO said, is no. So in context of the telecoms industry, employee costs as a percentage of OPEX tends to be about a third, and as a percentage of revenue tends to be about 16%. For TSTT, our employee costs are just around 50%, about 45%, and of revenue as much as 25%. So we are way off of the KPIs. So short answer to the question is we are not comforted, and the major ultimate reason really revolves around our employee costs, really for two reasons. One, we have a defined benefit plan as opposed to contribution, which carries significantly more costs. And of course, COLA, in terms of the, we have roughly 2,200 staff, and this was an earlier question, 1,800 of which are unionized. The way those collective agreements are structured is that COLA is consolidated. So even if an offer, for example, which you Chair may speak to, is given of 0.00, employee costs, even at 0%, goes up by 7% because of COLA. And therefore, just to close off the response to your question, in terms of the $3 billion, how do we reach from $3 billion down to $100 million? As regards our core KPIs, they are very healthy. So in terms of our gross profit as a percentage of revenue, it's 80%. In terms of EBITDA as a percentage of revenue, the industry average is about 29%. We are around 24%. However, because we are changing out the legacy equipment, which I referred to in my earlier answer as regards last year it being impaired, we do have our operating costs around legacy equipment increases. So we ultimately go from $3 billion down to $100 million substantively because of operating costs driven by employee costs. Our gross profit is fairly healthy. It's 80% of revenue. And really and truly, how we come down to $100 million is really in the belly of the beast, really our operating costs specific to personnel costs, because when we look at the other expenses which you see referred to, whether it be maintenance repair or other OPEX, it's fairly consistent.
I crave the Chairman's indulgence to ask one last question before my colleagues. The last time TSTT came here before Joint Select Committee, or before PAC, I can't remember. It was a JSC. You had, just last one, you had about, when we asked you the question, you had about one manager to 4 workers, 4 employees. Could you give us an idea of how many managers you have within TSTT now? And when we looked at the the salaries and emoluments for the executive members. I see you have 10 executive members here. The CEO at that time was receiving a salary of over $250,000 per month. Could you give us an idea of the salary that the emoluments that the CEO is receiving, and the vice presidents, the 10 vice presidents, and also whether you still have a situation where you are top-heavy with managers to workers ratio? Last time was 1:4. Those are my questions, Chairman.
Well, Mr. Chairman, briefly, these salary details we are happy to share with you, but I would suggest we do it in camera.
Okay.
Or in writing.
Or we can send it to you in writing. Yes.
You could send it in writing.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, and now, Mrs. Batiste?
Thank you kindly, Chairman, but I would like to give my colleague the opportunity,
And then
I would then
No, well,
your offer.
okay, David Small comes on after. David, no, before you speak.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I would just like to get some clarification in terms of your human resources. In your written submission, you indicated that you had 2,017 permanent staff members. What page is that? You are at page 63. 63? 63, yes. Yeah, got it. Right. And subsequent to that, we would have gotten a figure of around 2,700. Could you explain that for me, because the figures are not adding up? Or is it that your ancillary staff not included here?
Our staff population comprised of both permanent, as mentioned here, and ancillary staff. So for the permanent employees, we have 2017 as at February. And we have a body of temporary employees of 151. But in addition to that, we run an arrangement where we have, as the need arises, for other types of staff, both in the customer-facing areas and in the operating areas, of about 405. But those are very short-term, casual employees. So what you got in this document spoke directly to permanent and temporary. It did not mention the amounts that we use on a very casual basis, which amounts to about 405.
Now, the figures given here this morning in terms of employee costs are high. I'm also looking at the fact that the CEO was indicating that TSTT intends to shift and become a more agile organization. Given your staff numbers, is your human resources in alignment with your new thrust, your new strategic plan?
If I could speak to that and ask the CEO and the Vice President to follow me. When I started in the construction business, we dug foundations with pickaxes, agricultural forks, and shovels. We loaded trucks with the excess dig. They went to the landfill. They unloaded it with shovels and so on. Today, we dig excavations mechanically, we load mechanically, and in seconds a truck can discharge 15 cubic meters in the landfill. So the construction industry recalibrated the way it used its workforce, and this is exactly what is going to happen in the telecommunications sector. And I think we have said so openly to our trade union representatives. The employees are aware of it. If you invest in technology, you have to recalibrate your workforce. So when I became chairman, and I looked at all the indices and comparators for other organizations similar to ours, every indication was that we had excessive headcount and excessive employee costs. When I became chairman, I reached out to the trade union. They were the first people I spoke with when the announcement of my appointment was made. I rang and went to their offices, and I attempted to get from them some ideas and suggestions as to what they saw the problems were and how we were going to go into the future and headcount, etc. Well, I was disappointed at the lack of constructive dialogue there, and I continue to be disappointed. But it is clear that the more we invest in technology, and the more we implement our 5-year strategic plan, the more we are going to have to focus on the type of employees we have, what their functions are, and their numbers. And it is very important for everybody to understand that this industry is not standing still. TSTT is facing intense international competition, one of whom has deep pockets, the other one allegedly does not. However, we have to be very careful how we go into the future. And we are going to have to look very hard at the numbers and the configuration and calibration of our staff. That is a given. Now, Mr. Chairman, maybe I could take this time now. I know you're a former trade union leader or trade unionist. I want to read what a former trade unionist wrote in the Express on the 11th of April, 2017. He said, as a former unionist, I fully understand and accept sloganeering, bravado, and even outrageous statements as legitimate tools of the trade. Now, I am disappointed by that, because that is exactly what I find myself hearing and seeing coming out of the representative trade union. So much so that 3 years ending last year has passed, 3 years has passed, with no agreement. And no proposals were received in spite of many requests, both verbal and written. Eventually, this company had to take the unusual step of an employee making a proposal, because 3 years are up, a new 3-year cycle has started, and we have no agreement. And this is the proposal we got, just so you know the challenges that we face. The total retroactive pay that was requested by the trade union, retroactive over the 3 years ending in 2016, was $653 million.
Mr. Elias, excuse me. We would probably get to that subsequently.
Okay, but I just wanted to say that in terms of head count and employee costs, which was a question asked just now, you have to understand, we're not going to do industrial relations here, and the industrial court will adjudicate on it, I have no doubt. But just so you are aware, we are faced with a proposal to pay $653 million in back pay and to increase the annual employee cost by over $300 million. That is a proposal. So we are hoping that the patriotism that has been expressed by the union leader repeatedly in recent times will manifest itself when we come to settle these negotiations. And they are very integrally connected with the head count and the compensation. Thank you.
Okay, I understand that, but Mr. Chairman, what are TSTT plans in terms of treating with its human resources? We noted here that you started a visa program and you said you revisited it in 2014. But how many persons would have been paid VSEP at what cost, and what were the reasons for halting that VSEP or revisiting, as you termed in your submission?
Yes, so thank you for asking that. That VSEP, in my judgment, was a complete disaster. It should never have been done. And in fact, the employees were prevented from taking up the offer, those who wanted it, by legal action from the trade union. So that's why it was withdrawn, but not before we lost some very good people, which we should not have done, paid out a lot of money, and achieved nothing. That was in 2014. I hasten to say that's part of the historical past, right? So in our judgment, that will never happen again. If we have to recalibrate, we will have to use a different mechanism to identify how we recalibrate our workforce.
I have also noted that in terms of your retiree plan, in your submission you indicated that the contributions made by the retirees is insufficient to meet the claims, and you are operating with a loss ratio of 166% and an accumulated deficit of approximately $340,000 over the last 9 months. How do you plan to treat with that?
This, I believe, is referencing the health plan. Okay. So the health plan that we run at TSTT is a self-insured plan. There are two plans. There's a plan for the existing employees, and there is a retirees plan. Currently, we are faced with some loss ratios that we are managing. For example, we are now discussing with the RMU around increasing the contributions made by employees. Now, according to the collective agreement, nothing can happen with this group health plan run by TSTT without agreement from the union. So to manage what you're seeing as it relates to the employees, we have proposed a 40% increase of contributions by employees. In some cases, it's just about a $45 increase every month. For the retirees, we have separated the plans. So we no longer have a plan that is commingled. The retirees now, prior to 2012, the retirees were not paying any contribution towards the health plan, but that has changed. So now retirees are paying towards the health plan, and employees, it is proposed an increase in the contribution. What we are seeing as we move forward, the loss ratios for employees are decreasing. So we are not in the position we were in like September last year. We are in a way better position, and the fact that we have separated the plans is working for the organization. So that is how we are managing that situation.
Mr. Chairman, last question for the session. Explain to us what is meant by sale and utilization of vacation leave. Now, I understand the premise on which vacation leave is granted. So I'm finding it strange, sale and utilization of vacation leave, and particularly given your employee costs and your operating costs. So if you can explain that to us, please.
Right now, we have a liability for vacation leave of over $91 million. That's the liability we face. Now, what we have to remember is every year, every 3 years that we have a new collective agreement, it impacts the cost of leave, because we go on fully paid leave. Leave is fully paid. So when we move from a 25 to now I think is a 35 for the longer period service staff, the increase in allowance or increases in compensation also increases our liability for leave. We have individuals in the organization with excess leave. Some of it is in excess of 250 days. In a bid to bring that liability down, we offer to the employees, not that they can sell all their leave, that is not allowed. We give them the option to sell leave or use the leave to buy equipment or handset, various things in the organization. So it does not go out to them in the context of the handset. It stays within the company. So it is, they use their leave to purchase those things. We also allow them to sell the leave back to the organization, and we pay them for it. The moment it is sold, they have to take the balance of the leave. So our collective agreement is clear around excess leave. So in order to manage the liability and manage or keep the operations going, we utilize that means to both control the increase in leave and also manage the liability.
I'm just having a difficulty understanding how leave can be accumulated to that quantum. Does the collective agreement not provide for leave being forfeited?
No.
So is it that the management defers persons' leave when they apply?
No, that is not what happens in the game. So I have an employee. So I have an employee who has 35 years of service. Through negotiations, the schedule that is applied to various individuals goes up. Through negotiations or over the period of time the employee is in the organization, 1 to 5 years is a certain amount. 10 and over is a certain amount. The majority of the employees in the organization, at least 60% of the employees in the organization, are at the maximum of their leave. So that's 35 days per year. The collective agreement does not speak to forfeiture of leave. The management of the organization manages the leave. There is a certain mindset, probably, of people in the organization as to how leave can be used. So as we move forward with managing the leave, we have implemented a number of things. For example, leave schedules must be supplied by the 15th of November every year. And that schedule is now managed. We are doing way better than we used to. In fact, we have been able to reduce the amount of outstanding leave, not only by the sale of leave, but by the pure management of the leave going forward because of these strategies we have put in place, especially the scheduling of leave and managing that.
Member, I think it's just fair to say that leave was poorly managed in the past. And so there's no, let's not fiddle around with words. It was poorly managed. Under this new management and under this new board, we have implemented some robust management mechanisms around leave management now, where people will proceed on leave, people will be held accountable, etc., etc. That it was just poorly managed.
Thank you very much.
Thank you kindly for accommodating me, Mr. Chairman of this committee. Mr. Chairman, Emil Elias, I was happy to hear your Chief Executive Officer admit that vacation leave has been poorly managed. Indeed, that is my perspective that I form. I will not proceed on that as I had intended to, having had the admission from your Chief Executive Officer. Nonetheless, Mr. Chairman Elias, I just want to take a slightly different approach and start from the acquisition of Massey Communications. And having heard all that have been said, as a member of this committee, I would like to compliment you and your board because I believe with the acquisition of Massey Communications, where you indicated that coming with that is the acquisition of fiber optic, the 55,000 customers, the entertainment segment, and collaboration with Massey with regards to the loyalty program. I would want to link that to your growth pillar. How close does this business acquisition take the organization towards the attainment of that business pillar that is represented by 20%?
I would ask the CEO to answer you, not because I don't know the answer, but I think he's driving it, so I will let him do it.
Thank you, Chairman. Member, so I was trying to explain that earlier, just to wrap up the conversation on the pillars. So you did indicate the growth pillar. The growth pillar is, let's say, made functional by a couple of things. One was to evolve and upgrade the technology, because we needed to so do. And we had always intended in our strategic plan to grow the business both organically and inorganically. Because in this telecommunications and what we now refer to it as the communications industry, because of the way in which it has been morphing, the chairman mentioned competitors with deep pockets, some not. But the truth is that in addition to that, our competitors are over-the-top providers, WhatsApp and Skype and so on, Facebook. Those entities are competitors to what we do now. People communicate via WhatsApp more than they do with their voice communications now. So it required us to upgrade our technology. We looked at it from the wired and wireless side. On the wireless side, we can talk about that, but this question, your question, referred to the wired side. This acquisition has advanced our mandate by certainly 18 months. The fact that we were able to acquire, because it takes quite a bit of doing to lay fiber and to put the foundation and to put the infrastructure in. And it's not just a question of laying the fiber, but it's all the associated systems and ecosystem there. So it has advanced us by at least 18 months.
If I could add one thing related to your specific question, and that is that while we may have saved 18 months, we may not have been able to do it at all because we are buying massive with TT dollars and we're having significant challenges with foreign exchange. So the question is, even if we could physically have done the rollout that we purchased, the huge benefit is we're paying in TT dollars and we don't have to look for the forex that would be represented by that investment. That was a very big plus and a very big leap forward for what we were talking about. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that explanation. So that having looked at where you are right now and where you're poised to go, I just want you to take a snapshot look at where you came from and to share with us what was the reason for the decline in TSTT revenues during the period 2010 to 2016, and what plans does the organization harbor for increasing or boosting your sales over the next 3 years?
Well, I would like to start the answer and ask our CEO to continue it. We have to talk about the shareholder agreement when you address the last 5 years. We had a situation where Cable and Wireless was sitting on our board with 4 directors, and they have, under the shareholder agreement entered into in 1990, they had the power of veto over CapEx. So if they felt they wanted more dividends, they would not agree to CapEx, I am told. They also had the right that half of the profits declared each year would have to be paid in dividends. We had to declare dividends, regardless of whether it was in the best interest of the company to hold the money and reinvest it. The shareholder agreement compelled TSTT to pay 50% of its profits in dividends. So it appeared to me, looking at the history of it, and this is again why I said the VSEP was a disaster, there seemed to have been a lack of cohesion, on the board, because the agenda that I think Cable and Wireless had was not in the best interest of Trinidad and Tobago or of TSTT. When I came in member, and this is important, and this is not political, and this is not partisan, this is a reality. I am satisfied that having examined all the documents surrounding the behavior of the various parties including elements in TAT, including elements in the divestment secretariat, including certain foreign persons. There was a conspiracy to swallow TSTT and to describe it as a company that could not survive on its own. We're going to prove them wrong, and we have proved them wrong. But there was a conspiracy. Now, they know who they are. I know who they are. And they know that I know who they are. And one day I may, when I finish my autobiography, write a chapter. My closing chapter might have to be this experience I'm having in TSTT. But they failed. And they failed because the convergence of their plan did not crystallize as they had hoped it would. And it resulted in, for example, a completely wrong RFP for a third operator. Completely wrong, commingled spectrum with a license for a third operator. They tried to choke TSTT to death at the end of 2015 when our license expired. They wrote us a letter saying, here's a new license. These are the two changes we are proposing. There are no other changes in writing. Well, thanks to our senior staff working over Christmas, they examined every word. There were significant changes that would have been to the complete detriment of TSTT. This committee and the Parliament needs to understand what went on. There was a moment when we almost had to close TSTT down at the end of 2015 because we didn't have a license, and I absolutely refused to agree to the terms that had been proffered by the then TAT CEO on board. The new minister, Mr. Mitchell, Randall Mitchell, then he was a minister, he intervened and we managed to save the day, and we have a 10-year license now that's appropriate. There are some challenges, that's why I say we have to look back a little bit sometimes. But there were elements, and it was all designed to swallow up TSTT. And eventually when that failed, Plan B went into place. Then they came with a Plan C, which is to squeeze us so that ultimately we would not get spectrum. Now, Chairman, spectrum is the lifeblood of a telecommunications company. We need 700 megahertz high-speed spectrum. Back then, in its best wisdom, the TAT management and board decided on a spectrum plan that would give this vital 700 spectrum, which is fourth generation, to give the high-speed wireless that we want on our cell phones. Split it into two operators only. Issued an RFP for a third operator that would be guaranteed to get one of the two 700 megahertz spectrum. The other, they recommended, would go to another foreign company, and TSTT was to be choked and shriveled until it could be swallowed up because they wanted to weaken the company. Happily, there is now a new vision in TAT. The spectrum plan has been altered to provide for 3 operators in the 700 megahertz, which was always available, but they know why they were doing it, as I said. I know why they were doing it, and they know that I know why they were doing it. Now we have been promised that we will get 700 megahertz spectrum, and so will our competitor. And there is still spectrum available if, in its wisdom, somebody thought, and I would say foolishly thought, that this country needs a third operator. So spectrum was critical. We are getting it. Spectrum is critical. We have since got a promise of some additional spectrum. We have rolled out, Mr. Chairman, this is critical information. We have rolled out high-speed, fourth generation LTE. We are the only one in the country with it. Nobody else. They can all boast about it, but they don't have it. Right? And we are going to get the 700 megahertz, and this country will have the entire nation will be covered. We will have penetration, we'll have capacity, and we will be investing in all the technology to make all that work well.
Mr. Chairman, may I, before Mrs. Batiste continue, I understand, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, you had submitted a report on this conspiracy. Would you be kind enough to supply it to us?
We will provide you with a copy. I wrote a 23-page report connecting all the dots.
Right.
And I am, as I said, completely satisfied that we have defeated the conspiracy.
Right.
And we are well on our way, having devised our 5-year plan, having got our financing, and having been promised the spectrum that will take us into the 21st century.
And again, before Mrs. Batiste continues, may I also ask, in addition to that report, the challenges and solutions may be contained there, but any additional perspectives you may have, can you commit it to paper, writing, and also send it to the Secretary? So, Madam Jennifer Batiste.
We would be very pleased to do so, Chairman, because I think this information should be widely disseminated.
Thank you. Madam Batiste.
Thank you kindly, Chairman. I would just like to thank Mr. Emile Elias for the cogent information that has been placed into the public domain. And as a member of this committee, I can only wish TSTT well.
Mr. Small.
Thank you.
Sorry for the long delay.
No, that's fine, Mr. Chairman. Chairman, if you'd permit me, I, as a member of this committee and in my own right as a chairman of another committee, I wish to, for the public record, I wish to register my vigorous disagreement with the position taken by the chairman of TSTT regarding the submission of requested information. I wish to state for the public record, and I wish to quote from the chairman himself. We have to look back a little bit sometimes. I was a member of a committee here. TSTT appeared before that committee, and we requested extremely detailed information, competitive information, even the shareholders' agreement. And everything was supplied in the highest level of detail, and nothing ended up with any competitors. Nothing ended up anywhere. I know several of these faces, they were very familiar. Every detail of TSTT's operations, customer costs, every detail was provided. The Parliament's information is held here sacrosanct, and I wish to register, it's a comment, Mr. Chairman, I wish to register my vigorous disagreement with that position. But I'm not going to ask you to respond, I'm just registering my disagreement. Thank you. I want to first begin by going to page 6 of the document, and I want to address the chairman because there are several areas of this document where I felt that the responses were not vague, but there's one brutally honest or brutally direct response here to question 6, where you indicated that one of the major challenges facing TSTT is, and I wish to quote, an intransigent recognized majority union. It is a refreshingly blunt assessment and statement that I didn't expect to see in writing. But Mr. Chairman, I want you to help us with the challenges that led the company to say that one of your major challenges is, and I wish to quote again, an intransigent recognized majority union.
May I say that I was hoping that this question would come up because I myself felt that the language truly represented the difficulties we are having with the trade union. And I'm sure my colleagues will follow what I have to say, but when the board asked, the board of TSTT asked for a report on all the outstanding matters in the industrial court, I would like to offer to share it with this committee. Hundreds of matters, which I found to be nothing short of inappropriate and harassing. So you have to read the matters. You have to read the issues. That's the first point I want to make. Hundreds. Most of them are unnecessary. In fact, Mr. Chairman and members, I was of the view, maybe wrongly, but I told the CEO when we were looking at the outcomes of many of these matters, the company was successful, but we never see a press release saying so. But if the union was successful in the slightest matter, it appears to attract an enormous amount of media attention. And I was wondering why we didn't do that. That's one point. Secondly, Chairman, if an employer ever did what this trade union did just 2 weeks ago, any employer, including the management of TSTT, we would be accused of all kinds of disrespect, etc. Now here is the leader of the trade union beating an effigy of our CEO outside of our headquarters. And this is supposed to be some kind of joke. This is not a joke. This is a serious business we are in. The survival of Trinidad and Tobago is at stake here. And here it is. I'm referencing the Express of Friday the 14th of April, showing Mr. Ramey with a butu, the old-fashioned butu in his hand, beating a boboli with the name Walcott on it. Now, my initial reaction was that I was disappointed that there wasn't one of me, because, I don't know, maybe after this hearing, the next boboli will be Emile Elias, right? But this is not the way to conduct a relationship. That's a second comment I want to make about why we say intransigent. The third comment I want to make is that while giving press conferences about TSTT and the problems that the union think they have, the word patriotism has come up. I counted it about 7 times. Nationalism, the need to build a company and to save Trinidad and Tobago.
Mr. Chairman, I appreciate the line you're going, and I understand where we're going. I want to get from you now. You are the chairman. I know your CEO very well. He's a very forthright individual. What is the plan to fix these issues? Because when I look at the numbers, Mr. Chairman, it's important to put these numbers in the public. You look at the 2016 numbers, and you see that the personnel cost per employee for TSTT is $420,000 a year. For each employee, if you divide the amount of employees by the personnel costs, $400,000 a year per employee on personnel costs. That's a high number. And in the realm of, I would be the first to say, I have no problem with people earning well. I enjoy earning well. But there has to be some reality where the company, over the period 2013 to 2016, has an accumulated loss of over $500 million. And you spent over $1 billion in the past 3 years on something called reorganization costs. So the company has been subsuming a huge level of costs, has been churning out not profits but losses. And then you have this extremely high, what I consider to be a high personnel cost per employee. I would like to understand from you, what is your plan to fix this? Because this is not sustainable.
Correct. And that was part of the intransigence, because we are certainly now faced with 3 years of just ending in 2016 of no agreement. So there's that uncertainty. And the next 3-year cycle is already 5 months old. It appears that we will be presenting our case to the industrial court. This is not a forum for industrial negotiations, but when we get to the industrial court, we are going to be pointing out what you just said, Senator, and we are told the union in no uncertain terms that we simply cannot increase employee costs. They understand that very clearly. There are different ways of doing that. We're not into the numbers game about 0, 0, and 0. That's not our language. Our language is we cannot increase employee costs. I mentioned earlier, and I want to repeat it for the record, the current proposal, which is heading to the industrial court in respect of the 3 years ending 2016, from the trade union, would result in a retroactive pay of $653 million and an annual increase in employee costs of over $300 million. This is absolutely unsustainable. So we believe in the industrial court. We believe when we present this to the industrial court, common sense will prevail, and we have told the union we simply cannot increase employee costs. We cannot.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me, if you permit me, Mr. Chair, I have a couple more questions. I want to go to the operational side of the business. I'm probably one of your first LTE customers. It works really well. I don't necessarily want to do an ad for TSTT, but the LTE works really, it works better than the Wi-Fi when I'm in Port of Spain. When I'm out of Port of Spain, I have questions. That is my question. Could someone help me to schedule for the rollout of the LTE? I live in the east of Trinidad and I don't get the LTE. So I'm happy when I'm in Port of Spain. It's blinding fast. I want to understand the schedule for the rollout for the LTE. And also, aligned to that, on page 62 of your submission, you indicated that you have been very successful in getting aggressive discounts on handsets. I would like to understand what's the company policy regarding passing on some of those savings to customers. Everyone who knows me knows that I'm a everyman. I'm focused on the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. If you're indicating here that you're getting aggressive discounts on handsets, what is your position regarding, or how much of that do you share with your customer base to allow them to enjoy some of the benefits of the excellent stewardship of your management?
Thank you, Senator. First of all, let me address your first question, and that as it relates to LTE. Now, I think it's very important to understand the context that Chairman spoke about earlier, where spectrum being the lifeblood of any mobile telecommunications company. You can't operate without spectrum. So we undertook what was an enormous challenge to roll out LTE in our 1900 megahertz spectrum. There is an allocation of spectrum from the regulator that allows us 20 megahertz of 1900 spectrum. The competitor has the same. We undertook a bold strategy to redesign our network, part of the pillars that I spoke about, where we spoke about evolving and upgrading our technology. Part of it was around that. So we began to roll out LTE in 1900. The truth is that 1900 does not provide for spectral coverage in the same efficient manner that 700 does. It's physics. The lower the spectrum, the more dispersion you have, because you have a different type of behavior. So we are still awaiting and quite hopeful now with the new TAT board and some new discussions that we had in terms of a change in the spectrum plan. We will have the 700 megahertz available, which will allow us to roll out LTE ubiquitously throughout all of Trinidad and Tobago. In the meantime, however, we have upgraded the 1900 network. It is fair, we provide fairly national coverage right now, but the ubiquitous coverage that you're looking for will require us to be in 700. As it pertains to the handsets, I think it's just important to note that we don't charge a markup or any type of margin on handset sales. In fact, the opposite occurs. We normally provide a subsidy, so it actually costs us money when we sell handsets to our customers. So the savings that are being described here really redounds to the ability for us to recoup some of that cost and to introduce some different strategies. What we have seen, however, is that we have been able to offer our customers better pricing than anybody else in Trinidad and Tobago because of our ability to secure some of these deals that you were referring to. But generally, we don't have a markup on handsets.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If you permit me, I have one follow-up. This is back to page 6 of your submission. I want to make sure I'm reading this right. under question 5. Because how it reads is that one of the challenges experienced is you're not using financial metrics to measure your performance. Am I reading that right, or am I misreading that?
No. The question that, as we understood it, was what are some of the challenges experienced by TSTT in measuring its success? So we look at success from various perspectives.
Yeah.
Financial is there. I mean, we have robust financials that we review weekly, fortnightly, monthly, and certainly we produce the annual reports on time, as the chairman indicated. But those metrics are post-event metrics. You can only measure the financials after the experience has occurred. What we would like to do is to be proactive. And how we become proactive is by instituting the type of mechanisms and measures that allow us to so do. And the legacy equipment that we have does not readily allow us to do the type of data analytics that we would want to do, the type of customer service metrics that we would want to employ. And so those are some of the things that we're doing under our customer service pillar as a program. But that is what we were referring to, not the fact that we don't use financial metrics.
Mr. Chairman, maybe one final follow-up as I'm going through the financial questions. I go back to the financial accounts. When you compare the 2014 and 2015 accounts, forgive me, Mr. Chairman, for going back a bit, but there was a 20% reduction in the cost of sales. I want to understand what accounted for that. And also, I understand better now what happened with the visa plan, because you indicate you started off the visa plan and it essentially died. Because I was going to ask, but from 2013 to 2016, your personnel costs have continued to increase significantly. And I want to marry those two things, because you're having an issue where your cost of sales is reducing. Your personnel costs are going up, and the profitability is affecting the profitability. And at some point in time, Mr. Chairman or Mr. CEO, there has to be a strategy regarding, listen, what is the plan to say in 3 years' time, in 5 years' time, when are we going to say, listen, this has to come to some way in which we have to move, and it can't be a baby step move, it has to move in a step, in my respectful view. It has to be a step move. Could you help us with what is the plan for that?
Well, let me start and ask the CEO to continue. So, when we invest in technology, we make what we have today more redundant, more rapidly. So the old telephone company, which is landlines, copper, dial instruments, even push buttons now, etc., this is not going to be the future. If and when we get the spectrum, if and when we implement all the investments we have in the technology that supports the spectrum, and we get the penetration and the saturation and the capacity on the wireless side, and also because of the fiber rollout, this is going to mean that we have to recalibrate the whole workforce, Senator. This is a statement of fact. I alluded to the construction industry. I ask you to take that, apply it to the technology sector, and you're going to see that where perhaps we had 5 people doing something before, we may need nobody there again. And therefore, we can expect there will be redundancies in the future the more we invest in this new technology. It's happening all over the world. And therefore, you were right to talk about the annual cost per employee. TSTT over the years, this is historical, it didn't happen yesterday. People earn good money, and the benefits are very, very liberal and expensive. There's no question about it. Even when the union is trying to be relevant about a matter and they're marching in San Fernando, they say, well, this is not about money, it's about the equipment and the engine here is not working. They even admit it because they know we've reached the limit.
Yes.
And Senator, when we reach the industrial court, which is the forum where this will be dealt with, we are going to lay out all of this for the entire nation to see. because it's the nation that owns the majority interest in TSTT. So we will be coming with that because we have to deal with it and we have to confront it.
Before just the plan, because I like your word recalibrate, but I recognize that the word redundant is really the word that has to be used. Positions will become redundant. That's normal in business. I know perhaps in the environment we are, people don't like to hear it, but given the current status of the company, it's, in my respectfully, unavoidable. So I think that in that context, you would have started to have some thought in your mind about what the redundancy plan will look like. And I'm not asking you to put it on the public domain, but to the extent that when the company gets there and has some shape around that, through the chairman, if that plan can be shared with the committee, that will be very much appreciated.
Chairman, perhaps when you invite us next year and we give you our on-time accounts, and then we only have to look at 1 year, we will have advanced that agenda considerably, hopefully, and we will be able to share it with you.
Maybe your company is so infectious, we might invite you before next year. Mr. Chairman, I just want to say a few things before I deal with some other questions. You know, today is World Press Freedom Day. And you know something, Mr. Chairman, I have learned from my own experience, do not battle the press, because they are part of the fabric and landscape of our democracy. In fact, they constitute the fourth estate. I would also want to indicate that as a former trade unionist myself, I was a bit astounded and shocked at the language. I believe that in any entity, particularly as important as TSTT, and in this competitive telecom environment, both locally and internationally, it is incumbent upon us, and of course your good self and your team, to begin to think outside of the box and try to find some more creative and innovative and imaginative solutions. Because at the end of the day, we have to promote harmony, we have to build unity, we have to work as a family in an effort to accomplish our critical objectives at the end of the day. So I say this in all honesty because what has transpired so far and the information that has gone out there is not going to help build the relationship that is so needed for the successful transformation and development of this very critical telecom entity which is owned by the people of TNT. So I would want to suggest that, you know, my colleague here, Jennifer Batiste, Primus, who herself was a former president, would tell you that, listen, we have to find ways and means of working this thing out and working together. That is what I would like to submit to you for your consideration, because going on the path that we want to go, that you are suggesting, is not going to work. It's just going to make things more antagonistic, more hostile, and the enmity is going to be greater when we need to promote harmony and unity. I just want to put that out for your consideration, Mr. Chairman. But as I'm on this point, may I ask, Mr. Chairman, if you can share with us the current directors of both NEL as well as TSTT, if you have that in your possession?
Would you mind if we just wrote to you and gave you the list of names?
Okay, yes.
Yes.
Okay.
There are 9 names.
Okay.
4 come to us via NEL, and 5 are appointed directly by the cabinet, the government, the cabinet.
Right.
So,
all right. I just wanted to ask you as well, because you made a very important point earlier, that because of the non-dependence of TSTT on the consolidated fund, and by extension the state, represented by the government in this instance, TSTT is able to finance and underwrite on its own whatever it requires in the case of that major loan that you spoke about earlier. But I wanted to ask, if I recalled the appointment, I think you just admitted there, that it is a cabinet that appoints the 5 members via the 51% holding, including its chairman.
Yes.
Am I right?
Absolutely. The government appoints the entire board.
Right. So all I'm asking is that, given the critical nature of the decision taken by the board and management to acquire, let's say, Massey Communications. I come back to this. Do you not believe that duty of care would require the board of directors, headed by your good self, to at least inform the cabinet, which is the body that in any case would have appointed your good self as chairman, along with other members to be directors? I'm just asking because when you spoke earlier, I got the impression, and I don't think that, I don't want the public to misinterpret it, and maybe you can correct it. I got the impression that, look, we did what we had to do. We didn't have to refer to anybody, as the case may be, because this was part of our plan. All I'm saying is that, would you not want to agree with me that it would have been appropriate to at least advise, inform the cabinet on this matter?
Well, Mr. Chairman, let me say that I hold myself responsible to those that appoint me, and we are accountable. That said, we do not feel that the board of directors needs to tell the cabinet every operational decision we make. Otherwise, they'll be burdened. They might as well be the board of directors. The board of directors has a fiduciary responsibility. While the acquisition has attracted a lot of attention, as we hoped it would, and while it will have a tremendous impact psychologically as well as financially on the whole country as well as the people who are part of the TSTT family, this was an operational decision. If we hadn't made the acquisition, we wouldn't be telling the cabinet we just bought 5 more miles of fiber and we've employed 10 people to lay the fiber out in Diego Martin and so on. So the board felt very comfortable that it was acting properly within its mandate, and it was not part of the cabinet decision-making process for the board to disclose to the cabinet an operational decision such as we were embarking on. Plus, in this industry, the very contemplation we had of this acquisition resulted in our signing a very strict non-disclosure agreement because the transaction may not have gone through. The transaction could have been canceled by us because we were not happy after we had done the due diligence. The transaction could have been stopped for a whole number of reasons. Also, we didn't want the competition to be aware of what we were doing because we didn't want it to be sabotaged if we decided it was in the best interests of TSTT. So for all those reasons, we acted in the way we did, and we acted always having regard to be respectful about the line responsibilities. Also remember that we have 4 board members that are also members of the board of NEL, which is a public company accountable to the whole nation, who also have a line minister. And with all due respect, if they wished to speak with him, they could have. We felt that they should not do it because we signed a non-disclosure agreement, and only after the whole process was completed would we feel comfortable in letting everybody know of the intentions that we had. So, and also the cabinet was aware that the funding we had in place with which to activate these operational decisions, and I refer to the Massey acquisition as an operational decision, they approved by giving a no objection letter to us raising the money towards our 5-year plan. And the Massey acquisition just fit into our 5-year plan just like a glove. So I hope that satisfies you, Mr. Chairman.
Well, I would just move on by asking, hypothetically, if for some reason the $2 billion that were raised on the local market, let's assume that against your will, a third provider is introduced in the marketplace. And the competition becomes so sharp and keen that TSTT have difficulty in surviving in such an environment. And in those circumstances, the loan becomes due. If TSTT were to default on meeting those loan obligations to the local banking community, Republic Bank, do you not believe that the owners, because it is a majority-owned state entity, the owners to fulfill that obligation and to bridge that gap would fall on the government and by extension the people of TNT? I'm just saying hypothetically, in the event of a default by TSTT, would not the government of Trinidad and Tobago, Mr. Chairman, be called upon to underwrite such an arrangement? Or am I going extremely too far in terms of my imagination?
Yes, you have a fertile imagination, Mr. Chairman. I would concede that point. Well, first of all, let me say that there is no obligation on the part of the government to pick up the tab for TSTT. TSTT has no intention of doing other than meeting all its commitments on time. Always has. Always has. We've been through many problems and challenges, but we always have done so. And this new board will continue to vigorously pursue that mandate. Mr. Chairman, the banks, you may have dealt with banks before, they did the most intense due diligence of the company and of our 5-year plan. The financial community of Trinidad and Tobago welcomed the opportunity to invest. Yes, Republic Bank underwrote the whole loan, but as you know, this is often syndicated and various financial institutions, and they meet me from time to time and they say very, very with great pleasure actually that we took up some of this and we're very excited by it and that sort of thing. We have the support of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. We are a homegrown company. I am confident that the scenario you postulated, while always possible in the business world, I would say that if a third operator came into Trinidad and Tobago, and I assume you mean in the wireless, in the cellular business, and they got a license, they're starting from zero. They don't have the towers. They don't have the customer base. This country already has over 2 million cell phones. You were alluding to a population level slightly less than mine. Every man, woman, and child in this country, in theory, has an average of 1.5 cell phones, even those that were born last week. So it doesn't make common sense for somebody to say they're going to come in and play Bad John and so on, because TSTT is just like a Google tree. Our fruit up there, anybody who wants to come at that fruit has to climb through lots of pickers in the trunk before they get up there. Now, they don't get a lot of joke. So I have no fear of competition. I have no fear if they have a third operator. It doesn't make common sense because it will cost the country a lot of foreign exchange, and there are a lot of negatives. However, that is above my pay grade. If somebody feels they want to do it, let them come and try. But don't think you're going to come and pluck my Grugubef so easily. That's all I have to say.
Before I ask Dr. Gopi Singh to intervene, I have one final area I'd like to get your response to. And that has to do with why was Massey Communications selected for acquisition as opposed to another company in the same field of business?
Okay, so, Chairman, what happened was we were approached by Massey, first of all, to consider infrastructure sharing, because logically, if they have fiber, once it's laid, can accommodate any number of operators. So they had already laid out the fiber, and they were facing their own challenges with capital investment, and they said, it makes sense if we let you use all the fiber we have, and you let us use the fiber you have, so we share infrastructure. Also, their technology was compatible with ours. This was a critical point. There was compatibility in the way we would interface with each other. The conversation evolved, and then it transpired that they appeared to be interested in a divestment and to refocus their attention in their core areas of business. This is our core area. We were very happy to consider it. And then it was taken from there with all the studies, with all the due diligences, with all the analyses about where they were, the areas they had laid, whether it was a good fit for us. So there's no one else, really, I think. This was like a perfect marriage, if you like, arranged as it may have been, but it was still ideal. And there's nobody else. I mean, we're the logical people. We're both local companies, and we also saw it as a future together. Remember, TSTT is going to be the service provider for the entire Massey conglomerate going forward on the business sector. And we want to build on that as well. We want to build on the strengths they had and on the fact that everything they did fitted what we needed. So there was no, if I like to say, there was no other suitor, and there was nobody else we wanted to suit up with.
And Mr. Chairman, could you just share with this committee when the actual negotiations commenced, and probably you may want to share with us in terms of the sharing of our infrastructure with Massey and vice versa. When did this whole matter develop that may have led TSTT eventually to where it arrived yesterday?
Thank you. So a few months ago, we were approached with the offer by Massey to do the infrastructure sharing. We took it to the board of directors. The board of directors agreed in principle and instructed the CEO to proceed to discuss the logistics and the details of how the infrastructure might work, the infrastructure sharing, sorry. So over the course of the last few months, about 4 months, while that discussion was going on, as approved by our board, we learned that they would consider actually getting out of the business. And we began to progress those discussions. And about 4 or 6 weeks ago, we signed the non-disclosure agreement and began the intense examination of what we would acquire should we wish to do so. After that was done, the board considered it and gave its approval to move forward in a particular way. And actually, only half an hour before the press conference yesterday, the final documents and all the amendments and all the legal corrections were completed, and we signed, if you like, in camera, and then the media arrived and we made the announcement. So I think for our well-wishers it was a moment of extreme happiness and elation. For the competition, it was, oh my God, I didn't know this was happening. And I guess the nation ought to be as happy as we are, because I think not only is this acquisition critical in terms of our 5-year plan, but I cannot overemphasize when we get the spectrum and when our other investments in the technology, which is running in parallel, happen, that TSTT is going to be the #1 force in telecommunications in this country.
Chairman, thank you. We listened to you attentively, and we fully appreciate and understand the difficulties you have encountered and are continuing to encounter, well, with some alleviation of the relationship with TAT, and of course your issues related to the labor movement and so on. And we wish you well in your continued relationship with these two major organizations and continued success. The 49% shares owed by Cable and Wireless that was sold to another company that sold recently to Liberty, if I'm correct.
Yes.
Now, Liberty is a major international global IT company as well. Could you give an appreciation of how you feel that you may have to deal with this competitiveness, particularly now if Liberty begins to press for board directors to replace the NEL board directors, the 4 that are there? That's my first question. This might be a human resource management question and a quality control question. Now, with the integration of Massey Communication into your existing dispensation, are you going to contemplate certain provisions to be put in place to address the issues of overall service quality and delivery, since these are two critical areas that continue to hurt your competitiveness? Well, I question this in light of the landscape that you now operate in. And you know that, and as all of us know, that the efficiency of the communication system which TSTT operates in at the moment has certain weaknesses. And I remember being a member of the Finance and General Purpose Committee in Cabinet, where TSTT also came. And we asked them about the amount of dropped calls that exist. And the answer was then that they are working on it, and they gave a percentage of the amount of dropped calls. And that is about 3 or 4 years ago. And there was the decision of TSTT at that time to look into it, investigate it, and make amelioration to it. And you would know, Mr. Chairman, and all members there, that there are certain areas of Trinidad that have been consistently dropping calls. Like the Lady Young, you can't get calls there in front of Central Bank, certain places on the highway going down south. So I asked the question, that now with Massey coming on and the competitiveness that you would still continue, how you, and the landscape that you operating in, how you expect to deal with these two issues?
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Chairman. Let me address, the first point is that Cable and Wireless are permanently off the board of TSTT. Permanently. There's no coming back.
Okay.
They're licensed to operate in conjunction with Flow. As I said, some people say they acquired Flow, others say it's the reverse, and now Liberty comes on top and has acquired all of them. They are permanently off this board. They have conceded that they are off permanently and that they have to sell the 49% shares that they have. They have not yet sold it. In my judgment, they're asking far too much money, and there's been no buyer stepping forward yet. But we're hoping that in the current extension of time that has been given to them by TAT, to sell the shares, that in fact that will happen. I am hopeful. I understand that, I hear that there are certain moves being made. Hopefully that will happen.
Stick a pin. Is there any thought process forward? But this might be opening up some confidential thinking.
Sorry, I don't know who these buyers are.
Is there any thought process from TSTT to acquire that?
Sorry?
Is there any thought process by TSTT to acquire that?
No. We are not in the market to buy the 49%.
Okay.
Whoever that may be, whenever that happens, we will do that. But Cable and Wireless have not sold the shares as yet. But I just wanted to comfort this committee. There's no possibility of them coming back onto the board of TSTT. They're permanently gone. They just have to sell the shares. They have to sell their shares, and we are insisting they must sell their shares. And once that is done, then the future configuration of the shareholdings and how we go into the future in respect of that aspect, then that is a matter for the shareholders to deal with. And I hope we will be consulted, but that'll be up to them. Now, for the second part of your question to do with drop calls and the integration with the Massey acquisition, I'll ask our CEO to address those points.
So, I mean, we can go, Vice Chair, into some specifics. I know we looked very intently at the quality of our network. Now, part of what I was alluding to before when I was speaking initially was the fact that we needed to upgrade the technology, but not just upgrade, evolve. And what does this mean for us in the mobile side? Just very simply, we were operating GSM technology, that's 15-year-old technology. We've basically stopped doing that. We've moved into HSPA and voice type, data type solutions on the network side. Lady Young is an area that we've recently done quite a lot of work on. I would be very surprised if there's still drop calls on the Lady Young. We know where all the coverage gaps are. I remember the last time I was here at the Joint Select, I did indicate that there is one corollary that we need to be cognizant of. When we know where the gaps are, and we look at coverage gaps and to address them in various ways. We look at solutions that doesn't require infrastructure, so power and azimuth and tilt and amplification and all of those various type of solutions-oriented moves that we can make to fill a coverage gap. But in some instances, you simply have to put infrastructure in. And sometimes we've had challenges, and I mentioned it then, we still have those challenges today in getting approvals to put infrastructure in some areas. But the quality of our network, I dare say, Vice Chair, that is superior to the competitor. We're absolutely certain of that. And our network quality is of the highest order. And we do look at our coverage gaps intently.
Would you address the point as to how we can mitigate even those drop calls when we get the 700 spectrum and the impact of 700 on that?
Yes, so the fact is, Senator Small alluded to it, is that LTE, which is the highest quality data network, with 700, we can deploy it ubiquitously throughout all of Trinidad and Tobago. If we're able to get the spectrum, right now, let me ask the CTIO, what is our drop call rate?
Drop call rate currently is 0.3% average across the network, which is significantly below the 1.2% target for telcos across the globe. And that's all.
But even at that very low drop call rate that we monitor daily, we still want to get below that. The 700 spectrum allows us to roll out LTE that would basically give us the type of robust network that is second to none. We're confident of that.
Go ahead.
All right, Mr. Hart. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman and CEO and visitors, I deliberately desisted from engagement in previous discussion here for what I consider to be obvious reasons as line minister. So I now make a short introduction as Member of Parliament because I received persistent complaints from the citizens living in the St. Barb's block. All illegal activities, including fraud, for the benefit of the company. 3, cover-ups of incidences of fraud and retaliation against witnesses in fraud cases are strictly forbidden. And 4, all incidences of fraud shall result in disciplinary actions, including dismissal, being taken against the perpetrator or perpetrators. Now, in respect of items 1 and 2, I think those are broad enough to include, since it talks about all illegal activities, sharing information or interfering with your technology to cut communication. I say this in the context of our national security concerns for terrorism and cybercrime. If, for example, an operation has to be put, a national security operation in a particular area, and a member of your staff chooses to cut communication in that area to debilitate the attempts at law enforcement, that's a very serious matter, particularly in light of cybercrime and terrorism. Those matters are not, it's under the rubric fraud. But I would like to ask then, have you had many cases of fraud, and if so, how many? Between, well, say in the last 6 years. Have you had any issues along the lines that I have just raised? And if so, what is being done to treat particularly with those issues? Including, of course, if I didn't deal with this before, the question of sharing information garnered by employees of TSTT with unauthorized persons. If you wish, given the time frame, because I know the chairman, well, we were looking at winding down. If you wish, you can make this information available in writing.
Yes, well, thank you. We could do that. I'd like to say that you raised some very important points that sometimes we think is self-evident, but it's good to define it, as you rightly said, about cutting communications and so on. I have my colleague Ian Narayan is the chairman of one of the 4 subcommittees of the board, which is the Audit Committee, and they are directly responsible for managing some of the issues just yet. I would like to ask Ian if he would speak to it.
Okay. I would not have the specific numbers in relation to the question that you asked about the number of incidences of fraud spanning 6 years. So that is something that we may have to provide to you subsequently in writing or otherwise. But certainly the internal audit framework and the manner in which it is currently rolled out, it does speak to looking at and looking after incidences of fraud to determine whether those things are taking place. And yes, there have been incidences which we can provide the details of, and those have been treated within accordance with our HR policies.
All right, Mr. Chairman, I think that we have come to the end of our inquiry, and before finally bringing this to an end, may I invite you, if you would like to make any closing remarks or comments, you can do so at this time.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to say that I personally found this morning to be stimulating, if not I wouldn't say entertaining, but stimulating, and very informative. And I enjoyed the questions, and it has given me a lot of food for thought, as I'm sure it has given everybody from TSTT. We are a family of people hoping to do the very best we can for Trinidad and Tobago. And I would like to say to the members of this committee that when we end, I'm going to go around and examine your phones, and I hope they'll all be mobiles. Right. So, and if they are, you should immediately do like Senator Small and get our LTE. We're the only network with it. I want to thank you again, Chairman, for your cordial welcome and for the way you've treated the TSTT team. And we will be supplying you with all of the information you asked, subject to the little caveat that we had earlier, but I will seek some advice on that one. Hopefully we will come to a meeting of the mind on it. Thank you again very much.
I, on behalf of the Public Accounts Enterprises Committee, extend our collective appreciation to all the officials from the Ministry of Finance, Investments Division, Ministry of Public Utilities, and of course, members of the TSTT family for being here for the last few hours, as well as the media that have been covering this inquiry, and of course, the public that have tuned in to this event. As I said, Mr. Chairman, our role is to, as a committee, is to determine how we can assist, how we can help, how we can support TSTT in better delivering quality goods and services to the people of the Republic of TNT. Because at the end of the exercise, our mandate is really to work towards improving the quality of life and standard of living of the citizenry throughout the Republic of TNT. In this light, I again would like to appeal to you, Mr. Chairman, to feel free to submit to this committee your thoughts on the challenges faced by TSTT and what are some of the possible solutions that you would like us to consider as we seek to make TSTT more viable as we move towards transformation, modernization in the 21st century. So that is what we would like to do in seeking to submit a report to the Parliament. And I want to give you the assurance, feel free. We have never in any way breached confidentiality. As Mr. Small has indicated to you, you were here before, and we got whatever we requested, and to date, none of the information has found its way into anybody's hands except the hands of the Parliament. So I want to give you the assurance that this committee and the Parliament takes confidentiality very seriously. So you don't have to be worried about anything going out there and being leaked to competitors in the marketplace. So once again, we will be writing to you very shortly to provide you with the additional information we need. And we would like to ask you if you can supply those pieces of information to us within a 2-week deadline so that we can generate a report to the Parliament on this very important state entity called TSTT. So once again, on behalf of this committee, we'd like to thank you for being here. We look forward to communicating with you in the future, and certainly if we need any further clarification, we shall communicate with you. If not, we shall bring you back in 2017. Thank you very much, and this meeting is now suspended.